I'm Dr. Emoche Adoyi. Every nation makes a promise to its people to protect life. But what happens when fear begins to replace that promise? Millions of Nigerians begin each day hoping for safety, hoping to return home. Security is the first responsibility of every government. I'm Dr. Emoche Adoyi. As a forensic psychologist and criminal justice specialist, I don't begin with assumptions. I begin with evidence. Before opinions, we must understand the law. Two public positions, one important legal question. Can sovereignty limit international involvement? What does international law actually say? Every investigation begins locally. Information moves from communities to state and federal authorities.
State leaders gather information, coordinate with security agencies, and communicate with federal authorities. We have the latest intel from the field.
Perimeter is secure, awaiting federal support. When a situation extends beyond one community or state, federal institutions play a central coordinating role. The next question is one of law, not politics. What powers does the United Nations actually have? To understand this debate, we must first understand one word: sovereignty. Sovereignty means every independent nation has the authority to govern its own territory and people. Sovereignty gives a nation authority, but it also carries responsibility toward the people it serves. After World War II, countries created the United Nations to promote peace, cooperation, and respect for human rights. Nigeria joined the United Nations as a member state and accepted responsibilities under the UN Charter. Membership in international organizations does not erase sovereignty. It creates commitments that countries voluntarily accept. International law seeks to balance two important principles: respect for national sovereignty and protection of fundamental human rights. Most criminal investigations remain national matters. International involvement depends on legal authority, cooperation, and the circumstances. The next question is not whether the United Nations exists, but when international law allows it to become involved. In the next chapter, we examine what the United Nations can do, what it cannot do, and why those limits matter. The United Nations is not a world government. It works through international law and the cooperation of its member states. Most UN actions begin with cooperation. Countries often request assistance or work together through international institutions. One pathway is voluntary assistance. A government may ask for technical or humanitarian support. Depending on the circumstances and legal authority, UN agencies may provide humanitarian aid, technical expertise, or support for victims. The United Nations also has human rights mechanisms that can monitor situations, request information, and publish findings within their mandates. Monitoring and reporting are different from taking control of a country's government. International law sets limits on what each institution can do. The next question is essential. What powers does the United Nations actually have, and what are its limits? International organizations can assist, advise, and monitor in many situations. They cannot simply replace a sovereign government or run its institutions. The law creates different pathways for cooperation. Which pathway applies depends on the facts, the legal framework, and the decisions of the relevant authorities. In the next chapter, we separate myth from reality by examining the specific powers the United Nations has under international law. To answer that question, we must distinguish between cooperation, monitoring, and enforcement. One role of the United Nations is to help countries work together by sharing expertise, coordinating assistance, and supporting peaceful solutions. Let's review these proposals. Agreed, this is progress. UN agencies may provide humanitarian assistance, medical support, and services for affected communities when their mandates and the circumstances allow. Some UN human rights mechanisms can gather information, receive reports, and publish findings about alleged human rights concerns. International findings rely on evidence, legal standards, and established procedures, not assumptions. Countries may also cooperate internationally by sharing intelligence, forensic expertise, and investigative support where lawful and appropriate. These are examples of roles international organizations may play, depending on their legal mandate and the consent or authority required. Understanding the limits of international organizations is just as important as understanding their powers. The United Nations cannot automatically replace a country's government, control its police, or set aside legal system. The next question goes to the heart of the debate. How do sovereignty and human rights work together under international law? Sovereignty gives a nation the right to govern itself, but under international law, governments also accept responsibilities. The first responsibility of every government is to protect the people living within its borders. Countries also choose to join international treaties, accepting obligations that shape how they cooperate with the international community. These commitments do not erase sovereignty. They create legal frameworks for cooperation and accountability. National authorities remain primarily responsible for security, while international organizations may support or monitor within their legal mandates. A forensic investigation separates verified facts from public statements and then evaluates them using the law. Justice begins with truth. Truth begins with evidence. The rule of law depends on evidence, process, and careful investigation, not assumptions. When people disagree about what the law requires, the strongest arguments are those supported by reliable evidence and legal principles. Justice begins with truth. National responsibility and international cooperation are not always opposites. In many situations, they work together. In the next chapter, we follow the legal pathways that can bring serious situations to international attention. Every investigation begins with one question: what happened? Investigators collect evidence, interview witnesses, and establish the facts before conclusions are reached. Information moves through established institutions. Local authorities, state officials, and federal agencies each have defined responsibilities. National leaders assess the available evidence, determine the response, and coordinate with the appropriate agencies. The evidence supports a coordinated response. Justice begins with truth. I'm Dr. Emoche Adoyi. Sometimes national authorities continue independently. In other situations, they may seek technical support from international partners. International cooperation can include forensic expertise, humanitarian support, training, or assistance requested through appropriate legal channels. Different international and regional organizations have different mandates. Their roles depend on law, agreements, and the circumstances. Not every situation follows the same path. The available options depend on the facts, the legal framework, and the authority of each organization. In a forensic investigation, evidence guides the process. The law determines the available options. In the next chapter, we examine who makes decisions, what responsibilities each institution has, and how constitutional authority and international cooperation intersect. When a serious security crisis arises, who has the authority to act? The answer begins with Nigeria's constitution. The constitution divides responsibilities among different levels of government, assigning different powers to local, state, and federal institutions. Local authorities respond first. State governments coordinate within their jurisdictions. Federal institutions oversee national security and foreign affairs. Governors gather information, coordinate with state institutions, and communicate urgent concerns to federal authorities.
Sir, reports from the field. Cash was reported. We need federal support.
Alert federal authorities immediately. The federal government is responsible for national security policy and Nigeria's foreign relations. Understanding who does what helps explain how national responsibilities and international cooperation fit together. Justice begins with truth. Truth begins with evidence. International cooperation generally operates through established legal and diplomatic channels while respecting each country's constitutional frameworks. Justice begins with truth. Truth begins with evidence. Authority and responsibility go together. Accountability helps show that institutions answer for how those responsibilities are carried out. In the next chapter, we examine how serious situations can draw international attention and what that attention can and cannot achieve. In today's world, information travels quickly. Reports of major events can reach regional and international organizations within hours.
Responsible reporting begins with verification. Accurate information helps governments, organizations, and the public understand what has happened. Cross-check all sources.
Confirmed, no discrepancies. Civil society groups, researchers, and legal experts may also gather information and document concerns using established methods. Different organizations receive information in different ways, depending on their purpose and legal mandate. International attention does not always lead to the same response. Each organization has its own responsibilities and limits. The next step depends on the evidence, the legal framework, and the authority of the organization involved. This flowchart outlines the investigative process. Evidence drives the outcome. A careful investigator distinguishes between what is known, what is uncertain, and what still requires investigation. Whether the issue is national or international, due process and reliable evidence remain essential. The purpose of international law is not to replace national systems. It is to provide frameworks for cooperation, accountability, and the protection of fundamental rights. In the next chapter, we explore the legal mechanisms that may become relevant when national institutions face significant challenges in responding to serious situations. I'm Dr. Oshiomhole. As a forensic psychologist and criminal justice specialist, I don't begin with assumptions, I begin with evidence. Every country hopes institutions respond effectively to serious crises, but what happens when those systems face overwhelming challenges? The first response remains national. Local, state, and federal institutions work together to investigate, protect, and restore public safety. When additional expertise or resources are needed, governments may seek cooperation from international partners through established legal channels. Justice begins with truth. I'm Dr. Oshiomhole. As a forensic psychologist, I begin with evidence. Different international mechanisms serve different purposes. Humanitarian support, technical assistance, and human rights review are not the same process. International cooperation often begins with communication, information sharing, and coordinated planning. International action depends on legal authority, the mandate of the institution involved, and the specific facts of the situation. These processes may operate alongside one another. National responsibility remains central, while international cooperation may complement it where appropriate. Complex crises often require expertise from many disciplines, working together within the limits of the law. Let's review the evidence. Agreed, the legal framework is key. Strong institutions are built on accountability, transparency, and respect for the rule of law. In the final chapter, we bring together the evidence, the legal framework, and the lessons learned from this investigation. The investigation is complete. The evidence has been examined. The law has been reviewed. The findings now speak for themselves. Every conclusion in this investigation is based on evidence, legal principles, and established procedures. Every conclusion in this investigation is based on evidence, legal principles, and established procedures. Nigeria has voluntarily accepted international legal obligations through treaties and international organizations, creating lawful avenues for cooperation. International law recognizes both national sovereignty and international cooperation. Understanding both provides a more complete picture. The strongest legal arguments are built on evidence, careful analysis, and respect for the rule of law. Justice begins with truth. Truth begins with evidence.